Hi, I'm Joe Connolly today with Seth Linden, president of Dukas Linden Public Relations here in Manhattan, and he's going to give you some insider's tips on how to get better public relations for your business. But first of all, I want to ask Seth a question of interest to almost every single small and mid-sized business. That is how his firm, with about 25 employees, competes against a sea of larger competitors. Seth, how do you beat the big guys?
Okay, well, first, I am very glad to be here. And to your question, I think a lot of folks come on your program and they talk about, well, we've got senior talent and we've got a senior level service. And that means a lot of things, but you actually have to implement it and mean it. So I think it means a few things. It means being a specialist. It means showing up and not just doing the sales meeting. And I think if you develop a reputation for actually saying, we're not just going to be here to pitch for you, but we're actually going to do what we said we were going to do, and you prove that. It's basic, but that's a rule that I think a lot of businesses have trouble with, and I think we've been pretty good about.
Specializing is key, right? What do you specialize in?
So we're specialists in financial and professional services public relations. And what that means is we work with everybody from asset managers to accounting firms, law firms, and we are really the people who are responsible from everything from media placements like this to news releases, content creation on the website, presentation coaching, media coaching. So it's really helping companies tell their story.
So you're specializing, and then you're specializing in this industry, which leads to what? Then what?
It leads to really understanding what companies need. Because if I went to a consumer brand, let's say a fashion brand, I wouldn't have any specialization that would be particularly good. But when you're talking about asset management, or you're talking about accounting and law, I know and my team knows what to do in terms of how to position you. We know what the issues are. We know what the trends are. Just as you have become masterful over years of covering, decades of covering small business, I'd like to think in our small way that we really know asset management professional services. So it's specialization within specialization, no question about it. And I didn't realize this when I got into the business, is if you say, we work for a certain client, then that immediately is certain credibility with a new client or prospect. So it's a very close family business in the sense of financial and professional services. We work with a Fortune 500 company, Raymond James. And when we say we work with Raymond James, people say, wow, they must know something. So I'd like to think that that reputation matters.
Then you can go, from what I understand, into deeper subspecialties. For instance, what would a subspecialty be that you have considered expanding your business into?
Well, we want to do more in the world of content creation and website development. So we're not a website firm, but more and more we are writing copy for websites. We're also doing a lot more, obviously, in terms of social media, something we weren't doing nearly as actively 5 years ago.
Still, though, for financial firms?
And professional services.
And professional services.
Also, we're taking on more crisis work. Not that we are a crisis shop, but very good firms have real issues. It doesn't mean that they're a bad organization, but things come up, whether a key executive leaves, whether there is bad performance. Everybody had good intentions, but the numbers aren't there, and so our services are being used more for that.
Is that usually an emergency call? I suspect that most clients don't have an advanced PR plan, and they call you and they say, can you get here this afternoon? Is that how that usually works?
Well, to some degree. I think that proactive good clients will see a problem coming. And I do think that there's a good lesson for small business in the sense that it is a very healthy exercise to go and say, you know, what could happen if things don't continue to do well? And good firms will think about this a little bit. We've done work for clients where they essentially do a lockbox sort of approach, where they think about what would happen if there was a natural disaster or an executive leaves, and they at least have a plan to deal with that for the future.
Do you bill by retainer, by the hour, how?
By the retainer, generally speaking. We also do projects. But retainer I like, and certainly my partner, we think that's a good model because clients don't want to feel that they're constantly being billed and they're on the meter. So if you basically say, okay, we've agreed on a price, we're going to stick within the hours, that's a much better way to have a relationship. I think people get annoyed if you get on the phone and from the time you say hello, you're billing for that. That's not a good model.
You said a key phrase there, though. We've agreed on the hours.
Correct.
Don't forget that part.
Absolutely. So, you know, if we go a little bit above hours, I think that's just good business.
Right.
Now, if we have some sort of special project or initiative, we actually have to get on the phone and say in writing, okay, we're going to agree to another 20 hours. But we don't like surprises. Surprises are a bad way to do business.
What sorts of topics get the best positive news coverage for your clients in professional services and financial services?
Okay, well, since you know that I'm a former journalist, I remember something I was taught, that the word news actually has the word new in it.
Right.
And I think that a lot of news releases don't offer a lot. So it has to be a new product offering, a new executive appointment, and it also has to be very targeted. So for example, if an investment bank, a boutique investment bank, brings on a new managing director, that's not likely to be Wall Street Journal material. However, it might get play in the trade publications that cover that space. So there has to be a realistic expectation of what you're targeting.
Right, target the industry or the consumer. And then you do very different sorts of news releases.
Correct. And
obviously.
also social media plays a role in this too, because increasingly you might use a social media channel like Twitter to direct somebody back to a news release.
Is there a consumer news release that you've done recently that comes to mind that impressed you and you were delighted at the play that it got?
I'm sometimes surprised how personnel announcements get picked up. It doesn't have to be a CEO
Really?
being appointed. It can be somebody who's more mid-level, but the industry trade verticals really want the latest news on key appointments to good firms. So you can get more pickup than I think sometimes you think.
Now, I know that you also do executive coaching and speech coaching. What are some suggestions that you could give to business owners who get up and speak, some of them often, some of them rarely, who want to make a good presentation? Give us some insider suggestions.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Yep.
Okay. So I was once at a firm, a client of ours. A boutique organization, did very well, was acquired by a private equity firm. The CEO gets into the conference room, talks to 25 employees about the transaction, and is reading from notes the entire time like it's the State of the Union speech. He is not picking up the cues of the room to see that everybody is worried about their jobs, what's going to happen to the firm, and unfortunately was not in touch with the emotions of the room. I think that's a very good example for how small business owners, all the way up to the big C-suite of large corporations, need to know the audience. Now, I can't overestimate that enough. And secondly, they need to make sure the language makes sense, and they need to rehearse. Those key steps are often forgotten.
That's a great example of how not to do it, because even as you described that scene, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, this is boring. And that was just hearing you describe it.
That was my interview specifically that was boring. No.
You know, so then how do you not be boring? How do you bring somebody out who wants to make a better impression?
Well, I think a lot of executives are afraid to show their personality, and it's a balance, because you don't want somebody who's going to be clownish and not play up to the role appropriately. But a lot of people are afraid to bring in basic examples about their life. I mean, a speech is much better when you open, obviously, with a good anecdote. If you talk about your family, how you grew up in the business. I have seen clients who have given major speeches, and what actually gets remembered when we've rehearsed together is the opening story about when they were a kid and the tooth fairy was their first transaction. Those are the things that people remember. But I want to just make another point. It's the emotion as well. A lot of executives need help being able to have the right balance, because they can be condescending, they can be overly artificial, or they use too much jargon. And I think that's a real issue today in business. People are overloaded with information. They need simplicity.
What's overly artificial?
Overly artificial is they're in such sales mode that they start to sound not real. Because even in this interaction right now as we're talking, I'm conscious of the fact I'm speaking in sound bites and I'm trying to play appropriately to our format. But we're talking about people. And as you know, on radio, you can't fake it. You've got to resonate with people. So when you sound overly official like this, or you're talking about your great sales game, and we're going to do this, and we're going to provide this value and this widget, people do that all the time, and they don't connect with people on a human level.
Right. The listener can tell that they're on autopilot.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's one thing to sound as though you're in charge, but you have to connect with people in the right way. I find particularly financial advisors do this. They've been doing this so long, and they're so good at it, but they start to get into the same play over and over. Right. Well, it's about making sure that you're, you know, dealing with the market the right way, and of course there's dollar cost averaging.
Blah, 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 blah.
And you're not, advisors are not connecting with that person who's nervous. Right. and upset. And I think advisors, by the way, need to start preparing, because when we do have a market correction, they're going to have to do a lot of appropriate hand-holding and commensurating with the people across the table.
They'll be calling you for your crisis PR plan then. Hurry up, come in here and make me real.
Well,
make
maybe.
me sincere.
Maybe. You know, the key to this business is sincerity, and once you can fake that, you've got it made, goes the old joke, right? But I do think that it's increasingly important, because as you're dealing with millennial audiences are much more attuned to artifice. They've grown up in a world where they are much more, as we know, and you have conversations like this all the time, they're much more adept at figuring out the information. So just having a sales pitch that sounds canned is not going to resonate with a millennial who's questioning what you're saying.
Wow. What's next for your business? Where do you go from here? Next 3 years?
Next 3 years, we want to double in our size.
Right.
We're growing one good client at a time. I imagine that we will be doing more in terms of content creation and also crisis communications. I think that that's valuable. And I do think that when the market starts to downturn, more companies will come to us to share their stories and their value proposition.
Well, send yourself out as the salesman for all these new accounts.
Well, thank you.
Great
Pleasure.
to meet you,
Likewise.
Seth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.